Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels, demons, monsters, serpents, skirtards, snakes, and sloths, and weird mummy thingies.
Adamu.
And the Adamu. It is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of weirdness.
That's right.
Weird and strange philosophy. And I've been reading this news story that's been, I don't know what to think of it, so I'm just going to talk about it. So in Peru, they found this set of 5 mummies. So this is near the same place where they found all the longheads. Okay, the 300 longheads. They're kind of buried near Nazca. They've found these mummified bodies that, I mean, they straight up look like E.T. Or I should say the faces do. The heads look like E.T., but the bodies are very strange. They're real thin and spindly, and a couple of them were buried in the fetal position, sitting upright. And I haven't seen a picture of this one yet, but they claim that there's 4 of the large ones, and then there's one that's a baby or a fetus or something like that. But I mean, like, here, I'll show you this picture. Like, here's the face of one of them.
Whoa. Yeah, he looks like a gray.
Yeah. And so people, of course, were like, oh, those are fucking hoaxes or whatever. But so they got x-rays done, and they have skeletons.
Oh, yeah. I think I've seen something like this.
Did I show you that the other day? That's what...
I don't know. Didn't they find one of these? It's like really small. There's
yeah,
like a really tiny one.
And it was, that was also in Peru. So this is like the 6th or 7th one of these they found out there.
In the same area?
Yeah, they're all in the same area. Like, they're in this, this desert place. Like I don't think it's the Atacama, but it's like near the Nazca Plateau, which is all very arid. And here, I'll read you the quote from the guy. And this, I guess, is a direct quote, like verbatim. Nobody has proven that it is fraud. We are going to present preliminary evidence that will determine in the eyes of the media that these are true specimen. And if there are still doubts that this is real, the obligation of Peruvians and the whole world is to preserve these bodies to find true answer.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
stated.
I'd say it's well stated. It's missing some small words in there, but it's okay.
Articles.
Yeah.
Articles of unimportance.
But okay. Obviously, we don't know anything about these things, but what do you think of that? Like, do you think that these are alien, or could they be some unknown species of hominid?
I mean, I went through the whole alien phase where I was like, it was aliens.
Yeah.
But I listened to the Graham Hancock's books, Fingerprints and Magicians, and I mean, he makes a very good case that I guess really there's no definite evidence against the idea that that any of this strange stuff in the past and ancient past that we can't explain was not done by other humans or people that were from here.
Right.
And I also believe it is possible that there are other hominids, other species of hominid that were intelligent. So I don't know. I mean, they look like the typical alien,
Yeah, which of course makes you immediately suspect it, right? You're like, that's kind of like, why do they look exactly like? But
again, I've learned too that a lot of these things that we have, in our sort of folklore or that have become popular in movies and just sort of memes like that, all have roots.
Right.
You keep finding like roots that go back, and it's like, well, where did we get these ideas? You know? Like the ideas of magic and stuff. It's the same thing. You find
Right, and these things, by the way, have long heads. Like they definitely have elongated skulls, except they're elongated instead of the upward elongation that we see with the more human-looking skulls. These ones are elongated back.
yeah.
So they're still fucking long heads.
Damn it.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. Like, I had the same progression. Like, for a while, I was like, fucking aliens, right? And I mean, I'm watching all these videos about shit people have seen and, like, and then I'm reading things about artifacts found in the past. And, of course, then there's ancient aliens.
Right.
Okay, and ancient aliens, like, they did a really good job in pointing out problems with the sort of archaeological mainstream story, but then they answer every single one of those problems with, well, could it be aliens, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
no, I think is the answer to most of the time. But and then that made it easy for people to make fun of the idea. Right? I mean, that's really, like, we use I'm not saying it's aliens, but it was aliens thing we use that in a kind of an ironic way, because that original meme was making fun of that,
Right. Right.
But we use it in a way where it's ironic because we use it when it really could be aliens. Like, when
Yeah.
you're like, I'm not saying it's aliens, but those fucking plankton were aliens. Right?
Yeah.
So
I also think that it is. I just think that the probability of intelligent alien life existing out there somewhere is extremely high. Like,
yeah,
then
38 million highly intelligent, advanced civilizations should be out there according to the Drake equation.
right,
30, and that's in this galaxy. Like,
right, but the probability that they've come here, I don't know.
right. So, but even if we use the standard model, which says that you can't exceed light speed, I mean, probes. Even if you just say, like, the Black Knight could be an alien probe.
Right.
But yeah, like, whether or not they actually came here physically, I still think if there's really going to be that many of them out there, they would have gotten here at one point. So what I've come to now, like, and I went through the progression that you did too, like, where I thought it was all aliens, and then I started to, like,
See the possibilities that it
well,
could have
yeah,
just been.
it became more fascinating to me to think that there was a precursor civilization that we don't know about.
Right. Yeah, me too.
But you have to still contend with this problem of all of these legends of the gods coming from the sky.
Right, but I still even
You could say that they were flying hominids, right? The people that lived here somewhere else.
right,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
they flew here from somewhere else.
Right.
Here,
Right. Like they
they flew. They went and visited the flat earthers of their time, from the other side of the globe.
right. I mean, the story of there being a cataclysm that wipes almost everything out, but there was a very advanced civilization before the cataclysm, but then some people from that advanced civilization survived, and then they like say it was a kind of what's that place in Colorado? It's the NORAD base that they have under Cheyenne Mountain. It's a missile command center, and they've got you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know.
Okay, they're in Colorado somewhere, underneath Cheyenne Mountain. They've dug this, massive underground bunker, and it's like NORAD. They monitor both coasts for any kind of incoming ballistic missiles for nuclear war or whatever, and they're way down underground and it's nuclear hardened, so that, like, no matter how many,
Yeah, hence the name. No radiation. NORAD.
NORAD.
Scientists, they always do that shit.
Yeah.
And let's pronounce it NORAD.
Yeah. That's also an acronym, though, that makes it even more interesting, because it's NORAD, but it's also an acronym. It means, like, North American observation something. I can't remember. I can't remember what it stands for, but it does have a it's an acronym. But anyway, like, say that there was something like that in the ancient past, like, some scientists from that civilization that were down in a bunker. Maybe they were messing around with, because they seem to have like done a lot of tweaking with genetics, right? So they're down there so that if they make anything that kills everybody, it doesn't get away. We have facilities like that too, out in the desert. They've got these hazardous biological facilities, and they're way down underground, and every single one of them has a bomb that'll go off automatically and destroy the whole place if some like strain of bacteria gets out that's like deadly, starts killing everybody in the laboratory, the bomb goes off and destroys the whole thing. So let's say that some scientists were down in something like that, and then the cataclysm happens, and these guys survive. So they come out, and not only do they have all this knowledge, but they have some equipment, right?
Yeah.
And so they're able to fly, to all over the earth. Like they want to try to restart civilization, so they fly everywhere, and they are the gods. So I've thought of that, like that's a possibility.
Yeah.
So it's still not aliens, and they may have looked different because there were different hominids around back then. I don't know. I mean, like pre end of Ice Age, there were fucking mammoths and saber-toothed tigers. There could have been hominids that looked different too.
Yeah.
But the only ones that happened to survive they're the only hominids that happened to survive the entire cataclysm were Homo sape, us.
Yeah.
And the rest got wiped out. But there were these few that survived that were kind of tall, maybe 8 to 10 feet, had big eyes, like, the descriptions of the gods. Huge beards.
Yeah. Shoulder rivers.
Yeah.
And bowling pin hats.
Yeah. Damn it. But I still think... And what makes me think of the alien thing now? I look at the Native Americans and a lot of their lore, and I'm like, they're still the things that they talk about. The star people, those aren't human. They weren't other humans. They just don't. It doesn't seem like that. It seems to me like from their legends, I still see paleo contact, but it may have been long, like 30,000 years ago. Like way in. Like that, okay, that petroglyph you were looking at in Moab, those are not other hominids. Yeah. Those are fucking shadows.
They're hoverids. They just hover there. And
Hoverids.
They look, they have the upper torso head shape of a hominid, and then down below it just turns into a shadow.
That's right. They look like bowling pins.
Yeah, they kind of do. But another thing that I've considered is, well, I would just say this. It seems to me like when I observe nature that we're the aliens.
Yeah.
Like you watch these animals and what they do with each other.
Yeah.
Different species.
Right. They all have their place. Their little niche, and they stay there, and and
they kind of just get along, and obviously you've got predator and prey and all that kind of stuff, and so when a lion comes around, everybody runs. But there are a lot of species that realize that, for example, these birds know that the buffalo are not a predator to them, right? And they land on them and just hang out on their horns and whatever.
Yeah,
but that never happens with us.
Right.
You don't just...
Unless you're a Disney princess.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like we have these strange traits that are unlike any other creature on this planet.
Yeah.
And there are other creatures on this planet that are kind of like that, like octopus.
Right.
But of course they're in a totally different world.
Cephas.
They're down underwater. But they still they fit in their environment, and we seem to not really. Like where I wonder, like where do we actually fit on this planet where we don't have to build tools and do anything like that?
Right, that is a good point. There's nowhere where like with our whatever natural tools we have that we could survive.
Right.
Like we have to be covered with stuff because the sun burns us, or we freeze. Or
right. So rather than it seems kind of backwards to me, the idea that we're the latest development on the planet. Because it would seem like if adaptation were correct, then the latest development would be the most well adapted to all types of things on the planet in order to survive really well, Well, but yeah, I mean, that's one way to look at it, but it seems more like...
But our adaptation is our ability to adapt by building shit.
Right, which means that we could be extremely freaking ancient
Yeah, that's true.
as well. Because how long
We haven't had to physically adapt because we can adapt the environment to us as opposed to adapting to it.
So at some point, evolution was like, hey, I can actually like build this thing that can make itself look like trees without, I don't have to actually make it look like trees. Right? Like you got this bug that looks like a tree leaf or something or a walking stick. It's like nature was trying to make the animals look like other things in nature. And then it realized like, oh, let's try this. I'll just make this thing be able to make himself look like wherever he goes. Right. And I don't have to make his skin be able to change color like a chameleon or whatever.
You're saying like evolution got lazy like Enki with the he got tired of making the Adamu, so he made them able to reproduce because he was like, damn it, I'm tired of making them.
Yeah.
So evolution was like, damn it, I'm fucking tired of doing all this adaptation work. Let's just make something that can adapt itself.
And it's weird that it only came up with that idea once. It was like one day it was like,
it was done.
Opposable thumbs. Done.
Yeah.
Once.
It quit after that.
Why not give everybody freaking thumbs if it works so well?
That's a good point. Well, raccoons got thumbs.
Oh, yeah.
That's why they're so annoying. Yeah. They can open shit and they can manipulate things. They can open your little latch, open the gate. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
It just seems like I don't know. We just seem like we don't really fit here.
Yeah.
And it seems like if we were to me, just logically, if we were the latest development, that we would have a lot more traits of like fitting into the natural environment of the planet. Because if you imagine the first Homo sape that shows up on the scene in the evolutionary process is
like,
showing
cold.
up as like a baby.
Yeah.
That can't do shit for a long time.
Yeah.
So then if it was an adaptation or an evolutionary, say, manipulation somehow that made the baby from a mother that was not that. Yeah. How is nature so sure that the mother will know how to take care of this baby that has these abilities to take it? I mean, it just freaking doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know.
I agree with that because you're talking about it's not really gestation. It's the nurture time.
Right, but it was
so long.
Right, so it seems like in order to get us to the point to where we don't need the hair, we don't need the colors, we don't need claws and all that stuff. Yeah. Suction cups and everything else. It seems like we would still have a bunch of that shit that was needed to get us to the point where we didn't need it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, like the ISD, yeah.
So in order for it to then, we get to this point to where we don't need it anymore, how long does it take for those things to atrophy, to go away from the species?
Right. Yeah, where are our tails? Everything fucking has tails, except us. Now I know that there's like the end of the spine. There's those little three or four little fused vertebrae that they say is a vestigial tail, but it's not. There's no tail there. You know. I agree that it doesn't. The leap is too big, is what you're saying.
Well, it seems like if
the leap from not us to us.
Right. It seems like that we would have to have gradually gotten to the point where we had the capability to make our own tools and clothes and fire and all that kind of stuff. At that point, when we were finally there, we would have seemingly still had all of the physical attributes that were necessary before we were at that point.
Oh, so you mean like the brain would change before the actual physical body? Because that's easier to change.
Right. So you have right. So why don't we have like full coats of fur and tails and suction cups and claws and all of the stuff that would have kept us alive while we were stupid? Right. While we were still dumb. And then we finally get smart. And then how long does it take for all of that stuff to go away? I mean, we're talking, apparently it would be extremely long period of time before the physical attributes that you had were no longer necessary, that they would actually go away. Because if we had all that stuff, we'd use it. Right. Yep. Okay, so that's they do have the whole missing link line, the one where they draw from, basically a primate up to mankind, and they have all these species in there, what they call intermediary species or whatever. Right. And you can
like based on their idea, you can see that they're basically that the whole process going from is shedding stuff. You know,
Yeah.
they're getting rid of things like the whole body structure is changing, and it's getting rid of the fur, and it's standing more upright, and it's like the bone structure is changing or whatever. The cranial capacity is getting larger.
Mm-hmm.
But so much of that is based off of like a single tooth and a fragment.
Right.
So,
But I mean, if we had scales at one point, like, why get rid of those?
yeah, okay, I see
I mean,
what you
scales
mean.
would be badass.
Like why don't we have the big brains plus the claws and the fur?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because they would be useful.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
So then it becomes an argument. Well, they developed in this one area of the world where that stuff was not necessary.
False.
But we know the geological record says that the world has been in upheaval
Yeah.
way too often for this to take for that.
Yeah.
So like we would have still been shoved around the globe into various different
Right.
places based on all the cataclysms and the droughts here. Then this place dried up and became a desert, and we had to go somewhere else. And
Yeah. Did you see the recent? That reminds me. Did you see the recent thing that, like, because you know that the out of Africa, quote unquote, out of Africa theory
Yeah.
has been the mainstream model for.
out of Europe.
Yeah, now it's out of Europe,
Yeah, I saw that.
and Europe is cold,
Yeah,
which is like that just because Africa, like the idea like that we lost the fur and we don't have any, you know, all that stuff because Africa's warm. It's
Yeah.
It's, you know.
so they found what, a skeleton or
Yeah, like
a part of the
incredibly
bone,
ancient. Yeah.
skull and jawbone or whatever.
Right.
That
And
matched some.
predates Lucy.
Yeah.
Lucy is the I don't even know if I have to go into this, but like that entire process of finding Lucy is just, when you actually read it detail by detail, you're just like, this would never pass.
It's a fossil erratic.
Well,
Pushed over there
it's
by a
basically
glacier.
there was a river gorge, right? It was so there was like a creek or a river running through, and it had cut down through into the soil, and so there was this kind of like a dirt cliff or whatever, and they were digging into the side of it, and there were bones everywhere. Like there was a known place for like fossils and shit, and they were digging into the side of it, and they basically pieced together this Lucy skeleton from all up and down the riverside. It's like,
Yeah.
They weren't contiguous. It wasn't together.
Right.
So, but anyway, it doesn't matter. That makes me doubt the entire thing, because I'm just like, I don't think that's really valid science. You don't know if that jaw went with that upper skull. You don't know if that skull went to that freaking vertebrae. You know,
Right.
Because it was all over the place. And I mean, the guy was even, you know, this typical like Victorian era European white guy. He's sitting in his tent paying the natives to just bring him the bones. They're just digging all over the place. You know, they would just show up and be like, "Oh yeah, I found this," and he's like, "Oh okay." And he starts putting it together like a puzzle in his tent while they're doing all the digging, and he's not. Anyway, Lucy is supposed to be like, you know, this is like she is, I don't know, she's like 4.5 feet. Okay, like not necessarily like she's a Homo erectus. It's like the first on the line to human, like the first branch off from the primates. Homo erectus is the very first one on that branch, and then it
Yeah.
goes all the way to Homo sape. So they found a skull that's kind of like hers, you know, and some other bone parts, whatever, in Europe that are older. So that just made, but the idea of that one skeleton shouldn't have gone from out of Africa to out of Europe, but they should have realized that we don't know, we were everywhere already,
Yeah.
or whatever those are, right? Those hominids were all over the place. Instead of saying now it's out of Europe, no, but they need this origin point because of evolution, because it must have happened somewhere. There has to be a first one.
Right.
Which I think is just, I don't know. But
Feynman pointed out that it's really easy to poke holes in a
Yeah.
theory. The difficult thing is to replace it with something that works.
right.
So it's like, we can sit here and say, yeah,
That's dumb.
evolution is just like doesn't. There's all these problems with it, and he was saying that like, he was doing
Well, hold on.
quantum mechanics and stuff.
I
but-
do have a theory.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing out the idea. Like he was doing quantum mechanics or whatever, and they have these problems with the theory, but they're still using it because it's the best thing that they've got. And he would get all these letters that people were saying like, "Oh, it doesn't work because of this," and he's like, "I know." Right? But it's the best thing we've got. You're not. And he was like, I would read them, but I wouldn't respond because it's like too many.
Yeah.
And I'm just reading them to see if like maybe they have something.
Maybe, yeah, but all
just
they're doing
poking
is
holes,
naysaying.
and yeah, poking holes in the same places we know there are possible holes.
Damn it. We should, damn it. We could write them about fucking Elastic Universe.
Yeah.
Well,
But I know that's not necessarily what you're doing. I'm just pointing that out. Like,
Yeah, no,
It's
but-
easy to say it doesn't work.
I do believe in, I do think that that there was some kind of evolutionary process. I just don't think that it was by chance. And that's because I think that consciousness interacts with our material universe at the quantum level and is influencing things.
Yeah.
So think of that. That would explain why we have these. There's a cataclysm and a mass extinction, and like the Permian one, right? The Permian, like it's just fucking killed everything.
Yeah.
And consciousness is like, damn it. But then all of a sudden, bam, there's all this shit. Now that could be because you're looking at geological strata and like fossils aren't common, and so we get, like we talked about in like I think episode 2, you get these like photographs, like a
Yeah.
flashpoint of like, this is what the Earth was like 500 million years ago. And then this is what it looked like 550 million or 450 million years ago. So 50
Yeah.
million years later, it is an explosion. It's not an well, it is evolutionary. Like if you go from like having nothing but amoebas in the ocean to like having ferns and like crabs and shit in 50 million years, that's pretty astonishing.
Yeah.
Which is what the Cambrian explosion looks like. You get this massive extinction event, and there were fish and other stuff, and it wipes them all out, all the way down to like single-celled stuff. And then the next strata above it, the next cataclysmic one that has all these fossils in it, has all this different life forms. That makes sense if there is agency to evolution. If the evolutionary process is intelligently controlled and something is purposeful about it. And in other words, you don't have to deal with failed species or, like failed mutations. Like we do get mutations from radiation and stuff like that. But instead of relying on chance mutations, because that will take a lot longer, instead, if you just have consciousness like influencing things from the quantum level up, then what would happen is you would only get viable species.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And the adaptation is like an automatic thing. You can let things adapt, but a fly is not going to adapt into a fucking pterodactyl, right?
Yeah.
But the pterodactyl will be bigger or smaller. Like there's those there's those like miniature elephants in the Galapagos Islands. They're like freaking the size of dogs. That's an adaptation. The elephant is the same. It's just small.
Right.
Right? But it didn't grow like a second trunk or a freaking fins or whatever, It's like it's not speciating, it's just like adapting itself to wherever it is.
Yeah.
So that's an automatic thing that's built in. But crossing species there just isn't any evidence of that. Because there should be more intermediary species than there are actual viable ones that last a long time.
Right. Yeah. That's another problem I've always had. Like.
And yeah, so the idea of like the missing link has always been tied to. Okay, this is what I think has been happening. There's the classic picture of the primate, and then it goes in a progression all the way up to like an upright man carrying a spear. Right, and then of course there's the joke
Yeah,
ones.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, then there's the joke ones where after the upright man carrying the spear, he's all like Tarzan, muscular and shit. Like right after that is the slumped over fat dude with the briefcase, right?
Yeah.
Fucking evolution. But they've taken that, okay, because that is showing you a speciation progression. Not it isn't even speciation because you start out with the primate having almost everything that we've got.
Right.
They just need to get rid of some stuff and get a bigger brain. Right, so they don't grow anything new. But that still is the missing. They've sort of encapsulated the entire missing link problem into the question of like, where are our missing links? So they've spent a lot of time like looking for and coming up with our missing links, you know. And so now they can sort of fill in those shapes,
Right.
all the way up to the guy. But they haven't done that with anything else.
Yeah.
And I'll hear people argue about it like, no, because like the megalodon teeth, you know, like the megalodon shark, they'll point out that like the earlier teeth are not serrated and the later teeth are. And I'm like, you don't even understand what I'm talking about.
Still a shark.
Still a fucking tooth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not only is it still a shark, that's still a tooth. You started with a tooth and then you got a serrated tooth. That is not speciation.
Yeah.
It was a different species because it had serrated teeth. Okay.
But I still think it's an interesting question. Why can we line up these different species and see that there looks to be a pattern
yeah, I agree.
between them? That's very interesting.
Right. It is interesting.
And it's extremely interesting that there isn't a perfect linear development. That we have these like definite thing like harmonics or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Of the thing. Like you start out with, you know, the sort of
It's like what
do you call it?
Like the lemming is harmonic of a lemur or something like that.
yeah,
kind of the
like
same.
You start out with the like. Why can't I think of this? Lizard swims underwater.
The lizard, you're not talking about the trilobite?
No, just like a whatever thing lives in water and
An eel.
and it like then you have one that looks a lot like that but has like little legs on it, and then you have another one that has a little bit bigger legs and then
Salamander?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the next one has like dry skin and scales and
Okay.
like, you can line all of these things up and then you got, you know, this alligator or whatever. And
Yeah.
they look like
There's a progression.
there's a pattern to
Right.
them. When you look at seashells, there's a pattern. There's all these clams.
Yeah, so that supports the evolutionary idea. But
Well, I don't know.
No, it does because that's what I'm saying. So there's this progression that supports the concept of an evolving life forms, but it falls apart as soon as you look for anything intermediate.
Well, okay, let's take, and I don't know if this exists, but let's take the cockroach, right?
Okay.
Take a cockroach. Mm-hmm. You could find all these bugs, and they look a lot like the cockroach, but they're not. And there's maybe some bugs that are smaller and look a little different and less much like a cockroach, and you line them all up. And you have, again, this line of all these things. But the cockroach is like way older than the bug at the end of the line over here.
Yeah. So there's a spectrum.
That's what I'm saying. Like
Okay.
it doesn't necessarily support a linear development.
Yeah.
Because you could line all these animals up, and this animal we have records of far predating the records of the animal
Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
before it.
You can make the lines, but they're not necessarily chronological from left to right or whatever.
But there still is a pattern
yeah.
between them. So it's interesting. Like
Right.
think of it
And
that
there's
way.
overall patterns of like, okay, so land stuff has legs usually. I mean, I guess there's stuff that like slugs that don't have any legs.
Yeah.
But there's a pattern of those too, because they're also, there's marine ones that do that same
Right.
thing. Snakes also they don't need legs and they have this particular type of locomotion. But then there's scales and skin. There's fur and there's eyes. Like that's a pattern across almost everything until you
Right.
get down to like really simple shit. Brains, neuron, like just nervous systems. Like even when you go down to one of the simplest multi-celled creatures, they have a rudimentary nervous system. And that like if you pulled those nerves out of there and you put them into us, you would have to plug them in somewhere. It may only power the tip of your little finger, but it fucking works because they're all neurons or whatever. So yeah, so there is a pattern. So it looks like this is why I think it's understandable to have the evolutionary idea, but as you continue to study it, like you would do with science, you should see all these falsifications for the original Darwinian sort of by chance. Right. But yet you remain with these patterns, and then the fact that there's this contiguous thing with, like everything has four legs when it's like this, or, the digits or the eyeballs or whatever. So you see that, but to me that looks like And then the lack of intermediary species, you have this thing where it's like, so something is doing this, and this is why you have the creation problem, right? You have the false dichotomy of like either it's like 100% material reductionism, freaking linear development, mainstream story of evolution, or it's like 6K creationists, right? It's like this. If you start questioning evolution, they're like, oh, you fucking think that the universe is only 6,000 years old? I'm like, no, were we talking about the universe? No, it's a false dichotomy. But the idea that evolution is happening, but there's something behind it that's directing it.
Guiding it, yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be God. I think that the idea that creation, Jesus Christ, that yeah, Jesus Christ, creation, what the hell, God. That the idea that consciousness is directing it because consciousness is trying to interact with the material realm.
Yeah.
And it's developing life that it then inhabits.
That's cool. I have some questions about that, but we need to take a break.
Yeah, we do. We're 6 minutes over.
No, we're not.
Yeah, that's right. Time does not exist in the science cube.
We're 5 or 6 snakes over.
Snakes.
Snake Bros. Fucking Snake Bros. Yeah, we're back. Brothers of the Serpent. Second segment of Hour 1. Talking about life.
The universe and everything.
Yes. 42.
42.
So yeah, I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to both of them because I was trying to figure out which one to start with.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll ask both real quick, and then
okay.
we'll pick one to talk about.
All right.
So one thing occurred to me: cryogenically freezing a life form and then bringing it back to life.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of research and stuff. From what I understand, they say it's possible to do.
Yeah.
And it has been done on really low-level stuff, I think. The other question is, if consciousness is guiding life in some way, or causing this, trying to interact with the physical world and causing these things, we still don't have a process, a theory of how a species can develop. We've not seen it.
Right.
Right. And as far as we know with science, it can't just sort of happen, right? Like something has to cause it. So I guess with that, there's that part of that one. The other idea is if consciousness is guiding it and we're here now, or intelligent life has the ability to create a new life form.
Yeah.
Right. If life can be created.
Yeah.
Then
using other parts of other life.
I mean, if you just start with that, if life can be created, then it can be created.
Yeah.
So if we are conscious beings and consciousness is interacting with our world, creating life, and now that we're conscious beings, we should be able to create life too.
Yeah. Theoretically,
Yeah. So we talk about AI and stuff. So one idea, again, is that conscious, intelligent beings create other types of beings.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know.
No,
that's kind of way out there, but
no, because that's tying it back into the original thing we were talking about, which is like paleo contact, like aliens.
Right. But I know this doesn't really work real well, but we have these massive cataclysms, and then suddenly we see like all of this different life.
Right.
After that.
Arcs.
Yeah. So And then at the same time, we're discovering new life forms all the time.
Yeah.
And what's to say that those new life forms that we're discovering didn't just happen
Yeah.
recently?
Right. They were clouds of probability till we went down there and looked at them.
So yeah, I would like to just go on this idea of like cryogenically freezing something. Could there be a situation, a naturally occurring situation where, say, something happens to the planet, something blows up, but in the process things get frozen in such a way that it preserves them, large animals.
So
and then somehow they end up in another situation where they
thaw out. Yeah. So the problem, so from what I know about this, the problem with cryogenics is that we're full of water. And water expands when it freezes. So it bursts the
Right.
cell walls of every cell.
Right, so you have to dry it out, which is what the Egyptians were really trying to get
Yeah.
badass, and they were thinking that they were going to live forever doing it.
Right. So you have to, but if it's dried out, it's dead. So,
But if you can dry it out
yeah,
without destroying it,
yeah, then maybe you could like rehydrate it somehow.
exactly.
Yeah. So freezing may be the wrong thing to do until after it's dry. Right? Because even after you've
Or
dried
you could dry it by cooling it,
well,
pulling a vacuum on it.
yeah, but then it boils and it still destroys it. Right? The water will boil with it in a vacuum.
Right.
And that'll
Well, I mean, if you just, yeah.
if you do it slowly.
I'm just
you mean?
saying if there is a process, a way to do this where it's non-destructive, and theoretically there is.
Yeah.
Right? Or am I wrong on that?
No, you're not wrong. If you could dry something out and then freeze it, it would preserve it forever. This is why we have Utsi, they found him in Austria. He's like the frozen, they called him the caveman, but he's not. He's advanced. They found out that he had like meridian points tattooed on his body and shit, which is like Chinese technology. Like, it's but he was found in a glacier in Austria or something like that. So way up on the mountains, some people were hiking up there, and like because of global warming, the glacier had been melting back or whatever, and they noticed what they thought was a body, and they thought that it was a missing hiker. Somebody had died, so they notified authorities, and then when the the park people or the rangers or whatever, they went up there and they were like, ooh. That's not a recent hiker. He's wearing a butt flap. So then they went and got the archaeologist, and they came up there and they thawed him out. And he is I think they were saying he's like 5,000 or 6,000 years old. Maybe he's older than that. I don't know. But they called him Utsi, and like he for a long time they thought he had been murdered. Like he was up there hunting, and somebody came up there and like hit him in the back of the head with a stone hammer. But he also had an arrow wound. Okay, so this is why they thought maybe the first they thought he was hunting, then they thought maybe he was being chased because he had a wound from an arrow. Like an old. I think they found the arrowhead still embedded in him or whatever. And he was
hardcore.
Yeah, he was hardcore, and he was up there in the mountains where it would presumably have been inhospitable.
Yeah, the mountains were hospitable, and then he took an arrow to the knee.
I used to be a caveman like you, and then I took an arrow to the knee. But where was I going with this? Okay, the freezing is
dried.
okay, yeah.
He was freeze dried.
Right. So he was dead already, but the thing is that he was preserved like beautifully. I mean, he's desiccated because the cold also dried him out.
Right.
But he didn't rot at all. He's all wrinkly and shit because his skin, because there's a lot of water. So when all that water goes, you kind of shrink, and everything, and the skin is all like wrinkly and shit, and it also turns dark. I don't know why that happens, but the skin gets like it's black in a lot of places. It's like an obsidian color, and presumably he was like a light skinned or a brown person, But they could read the contents of his. His last meal was still in his stomach, you know, and it was the same thing with the mammoth that they found in Canada, the one that was frozen in the ice, that had frozen in the ice with like flowers still in its mouth.
Yeah, wait. I think I may have read about this story with the guy where they actually rehydrated his skin so that they could read
Parts
what the
of it,
tattoos
yeah.
were.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because they were like, and the reason they didn't notice the tattoos for a long time because the skin's almost black.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and then somebody noticed, like, what is this marking here? Right. And then they rehydrated the skin or whatever. And then they were like, holy shit, that's a tattoo. And they're like these concentric circles over meridian points. And so then they did some tests on that area and found out that like the meridian points were put over places where he had arthritis.
What?
Right. So
That's
it was,
badass.
yeah. So it's like somebody was doing magic on this guy trying to help him out, you know? And it's,
What is a meridian point? I was
The-
just pretending the whole time that I knew what that was.
it's like Eastern medicine, like, think acupuncture.
Okay.
Okay. So meridian points are like, they view the body as having an astral body as well. So like inside of your physical body, there's also this energy body, and it has like flows of energy through it, and they connect at various. So meridian points are like hubs.
Intersections or hubs.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
And they're, you know, obviously there's going to be some at the joints, but there's, you know, and so they're all over the place, and like acupuncturists use them to
Right.
like, so if you go in
I've
there,
seen those maps,
Yeah.
right, with the lines all through the body.
yes,
and stuff.
yeah, that's what it is, and that's an ancient Eastern medicine like thing.
Yeah.
You know, like acupuncturists know that map, and so when you go in there, you're like, I got this, my elbow freaking bothers me all the time or whatever. They use meridian points, and then the little needles and the shit, and then on some of the needles they have little cups at the end, and they put incense, a tiny bit of incense there, and light it so it's burning, you know, and somehow all of that is supposed to like fix whatever, some kind of problem in your you know,
Your energy flow.
connecting energy flows. Yeah, this web of flows of energy in your aura body or whatever. So he had those marks on him, and it's weird because he was in Austria, but that we consider the meridian things to be a Chinese, like basically a Far East. So that, you know, that basically shows that there was like contact.
Right.
This was you know, how did this guy know this ancient Chinese crap? Or
Right.
did he go to China? You know, like that's a long way to walk.
Yeah. In a butt flap.
Yeah. So he was killed, but he was preserved like, awesomely. But I don't think that would work on you basically kill the person doing this, right? It isn't stasis because you kill them.
Well,
so-
that's why my question was really, is it possible that there is a naturally occurring thing that could cause sort of, I'm saying cryogenically frozen, but what I mean is like preserving life in stasis, basically, you know, in outer space,
Yeah.
in a vacuum. And I understand that you can't put it in a vacuum because the water boils. There's all of that stuff, but
Yeah.
could there presumably be a process
So
where that could actually work
Yeah.
and take place?
I think, okay, I have no idea, but this is now this is making me think, and I've never connected these things before, but like I'm thinking of near-death experiences and what happens during them. And the fact that like no matter what the process is, it kills you. You die. I mean, all functions cease, right? You have no heartbeat, no brain patterns or whatever, and like it goes into stasis. But the thing is that what's happening to the spirit while that's going on? The spirit's like the body's dead. It leaves,
Right.
goes to the other place, and like, so I don't think it'll work because when you reconstitute, even if you could fully reconstitute the person and like fully rehydrate them or whatever, they're dead because the spirit's gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe it'll work if the spirit can come back, because all the near-death experience, like you know about resuscitation technology is getting better and better. So there are people that are dead for time periods that were previously considered to be completely impossible to come back from because you'd be a vegetable, You know, like if you don't have a heartbeat or any brain activity for a minute, if they resuscitate you and get your heart going again, you should be a vegetable. Like that long of a period with no oxygen going to the brain or whatever should just completely destroy it. And yet people come back and they are fine.
Now, are there experiments done on this type of thing with like clams or
I know that
slugs? You know, it's like how long can a slug be dead before you can bring it back and it's still a slug?
Yeah, I don't know because the reason they're getting good at it with humans because we're trying to revive them after they die. Right. And that happens all over the world every day, all the time. Whereas like if there was something like that with a slug, it would be in one lab and they're just doing it, so I think that the resuscitation ability with humans is advancing so quickly because it needs to. Right. And because people are using it all the time. Right. And there are some doctors that are just like, they have brought people back after 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's just ridiculous. Like I mean, there are people that have been dead for hours. Like there was a story that I was recently reading where a woman woke up in the fucking morgue and sat up and she was like, what? And she asked for tea. She's like, oh, is it some tea? Whoa, you're dead. And she was fine, dude. She was fine, but she had been dead for hours and hours because they had like long enough for somebody to find her, and put her in the freaking thing and take her to the morgue. And like, she was in a body bag on the, and she just freaking sits up and she's like, oh, some tea. That's to me, that's direct evidence, not proof, but direct evidence that what really animates us isn't physical.
Or it's more than physical.
Yeah, well, I mean, what animates us? Like the Greeks used to call the soul the animus. Yeah. Right? It's animating these life forms. Like a rock isn't animated. I mean, if it is, it's on a really long time scale, so we can't see it. It's like, because rocks do move around, but but it seems to
especially in this one lake in Arizona or somewhere.
Yeah, the racetrack playa in Death Valley. Yeah, those rocks move around. By the way, they think they have that solved.
Nah.
Yeah, it's a pretty good idea, but I don't see how it quite works.
Cymatics.
Yeah, I think that idea is great. The whole thing is going from the wind. But anyway, I think that's what it depends on. Like whether or not cryogenics would work or any kind of cryogenic process or preservative process, it would work if the spirit returns.
Right. So in a time of cataclysm when entire species are dying, then the conscious realm, the spirit realm, wherever that is, realizes like, okay,
it's getting packed.
It's necessary to reanimate things.
Yeah. And so, like,
you see what I'm saying?
Yes. So
right now, it's not necessary.
Oh yeah.
Like when someone dies, it's not necessary to like reanimate them or whatever. But you have a mass extinction event,
right?
And after that mass extinction event, it's like time to like reanimate stuff.
Yeah. So if it can, like, like imagine if you were a spirit trying to go back to something that hadn't been thought out. Like, how do you you need somebody there to kind of like cryogenic.
Right. But that's the other thing. If consciousness is trying to interact with.
But hey, there are those stories of like people breaking open rocks and there being a frog in there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like if consciousness is trying to interact with the physical realm and that's what all this life stuff is. Well, and if it is interacting with it on the quantum level, then it is interacting with rocks.
Right.
And everything else.
Right.
So
panpsychism, that there is consciousness in all particles everywhere, and like, but the idea of panpsychism is like I kind of think it doesn't really work exactly like that. But if there's a little tiny chunk of consciousness in every particle, then when you put a bunch of them together, it's got a lot of consciousness. Yeah. Right. But then mountains should be like the most conscious thing. Planets or sun. Like the idea we talked about in one of the early episodes about the sun being conscious. Because it's got magnetic fields and complex, it's a giant brain that's on fire.
I don't know what it is. I'll tell this story. I don't know why this is, but I had to smoke weed in order to have this concept.
Okay.
Okay. But I was fishing on a river and I smoked some weed and then I went fishing. And while I was on the river, there was this big bend in the river. And on the outside of the bend is this huge cliff of stone rock cliff.
Yeah.
And on the inside of the curve is all the river gravel, and then there's sort of river gravel goes up, and then there's a bunch of grasses, and then the whole forest after that, but it's kind of far away.
Right.
And on the side with the cliff, like there's some areas at the base of the cliff that have land, and there's some trees there, cypress trees and all this. And then there's this large rock thing. And then at the top, there's all this vegetation hanging off,
You mean there's the actual rock cliffs and the vegetation?
Right.
Up there? Okay.
So there's some vegetation at the base of the cliff right before the river. And then you see the bare rock. And then there's like all this vegetation at the top, whole forest, and some is just hanging down. And I was at a vantage point where I could see this whole curve moving away from me, and I was hearing all of the life, like the river's flowing, and I'm hearing all these birds making all this noise and all this stuff, and I'm fishing, so there's all this stuff going on in the water, and I just started to look at that image, and it was like the whole thing, the river, all of it was alive. Like in one single sense, as opposed to like all the different things.
Yeah.
It was.
You experienced Gaia.
Yeah, I was just like, and like the river carving that cliff and leaving the gravel over here and just setting up the whole scenario and the life that all flocks to it.
Right.
All the individual little species and everything in there. And I just saw it as like one big thing, and I was just like, holy shit. It just blew my mind. But it was like I had this sort of glimpse of the agency behind the entire thing.
Yeah.
And so there's all these certain cultures or whatever that believe in like the river god or something, and it's like it is this thing.
Right.
We've talked about that before. But you can take that idea and expand it to the entire planet itself, like everything going on here.
Yeah. That's the mother.
Right. On all these levels, and we're here on the surface and we're looking at all this stuff, but science even is often saying, well, if we weren't in this just right position between us and the sun, and we didn't have the moon and all of this other stuff, it's just like we just have this perfect setup scenario for all of this stuff to take place.
Right.
And it's like, if there's no agency behind that, or
it's incredibly improbable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you could look at that as, I guess that's why, the creation idea even exists in the first place. It just seems so
purposeful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I like the idea. This idea that I don't know if other people have this idea. I haven't really looked into like all the various kinds because I know there's panpsychism, there's animism, there's all these different ways of people thinking about how life, the spark of life, whatever it is, interacts with everything. Like why is there life? Like why isn't it just a planet of rocks and dirt and dust?
Yeah, right. Why isn't that good enough?
Yeah. Like why did it turn into things that slither around and crawl around and then things that start to move rocks around and stack rocks on top of each other and sharpen sticks and why is that happening? Why isn't it just a ball of gas or I don't know. Like so I haven't looked into all the different ways, but I know that there's a bunch of them. But anyway, like the one that I like is not that consciousness is in every particle, but that consciousness is interacting with the material universe for some reason. I don't know. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because they're intertwined, but it inhabits what it wants to. Have you ever noticed how certain kinds of machinery get personalities? Like, like people's cars, they'll slap it. Oh, well, she's an old girl, and she always, and like they get personalities. Like, and you get you get under the hood and you're like, why doesn't it start when it's cold? You know, like, and you can't find any reason. There's no fucking reason why it won't start when it's cold. It just doesn't. It doesn't like the cold.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between us or humans sort of
Anthropomorphizing.
Yeah, like we give things their own personality, but maybe they do actually have them, and it's a perceptive thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, like, you give personality to something, but it's because you see things you recognize. You see things that look like personality, and so you assign it. You know, like, in other words, people aren't giving something a personality; they're seeing patterns that they recognize as personality traits.
Right.
And so they'll treat it like it is. Now that's anthropomorphizing, because, like, you know, like when a dog smiles, it is not happy. It's freaking, like, it's mad, right?
I don't know, man. There's some YouTube videos of some smiling dogs that seem pretty.
When
happy.
they're baring their, well, generally when a dog is baring its teeth, that's a threat.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding.
So like, but we got YouTube videos of dogs smiling, and we're like, ha, but really that dog is pissed, right? So, like, is it actual, you know, when we assign personality to things, it's because we're recognizing our traits. But nevertheless, there are these traits that,
Right.
You know, nominally non-animated, non-conscious things take. I mean, like, even mountains, like, people talk about and like you said, rivers, mountains and rivers, they have certain traits that are personality-like. You know, this river or the ocean. Like, the ocean is badass, but sometimes it just fucking kills everything around it. Like, it's tired of it. You know, it's like tired of all these people that living on its edge, and it's like, just die. But then after it calms down, it's like, man, I'm sorry. And then people come back, and it just is giving them everything. Like, you know, like primitive tribes that lived along coastlines were always the friendliest because their lives were easy, because the ocean's badass until it kills everybody, you know?
Yeah. The ocean is psychotic.
Right. And then, so you can see there's with storms and all this stuff, like, storms have personalities, you know, or the sky. So you have the storm god, right? And he brings rain, and he helps your crops, but sometimes he just fucking kills everyone, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, so that's, and maybe people got that idea because they were actually interacting with gods, like Enlil, you know, who was like, he's running everything, and everything's bountiful, but every once in a while he just fucking killed everyone around him because they were loud, you know, and he's got tired of them.
Yeah.
But you had the other question about, and we're a couple of minutes over, but I want to get to this real quick. Your other question was about, what did you say? It was about consciousness and, damn it. Your second question.
I was talking about if consciousness can create life, then, right? Because if consciousness is trying to interact with the physical world and creates life from, like, the way we were looking at it earlier was from this other dimension where consciousness exists fully.
Yeah.
It's trying to interact with the third dimension, and then it ultimately results, let's say, just for the argument's sake, it results in us, a conscious being.
Yeah.
Self-aware, that now we can begin creating things.
Yeah.
So can we create life?
Yeah.
Then and is that possible? So just looking at that idea, it seems probable in all the vast time of the universe.
But what do you mean? I just want to ask this. What do you mean by create life? Because you have to start. Are you talking about starting from scratch, like from basic elements? You, like, build something that's alive.
Well, I'm thinking of yeah, you could look at it in that way. That's not the only way. I think if consciousness has this sort of desire to interact with our world,
yeah,
and it ultimately gets a being in that world where it can really just, like, go in and see and learn and has the capability, being in that being, to build tools, make things, do all this kind of stuff, that you would still have.
The consciousness would still be creating life, but it was to be doing it through tools that it built in the world.
It would be doing both, like a combination of the two, right?
Yeah.
So it's still trying to create life from its own realm, but now that it's got, like, a really badass tool in that world,
Yeah.
it can start creating it in other, combining
Now-
forces.
Right.
We
Yeah.
got the tool on the inside, and we got the mind on the outside, all working together now.
Right. So the consciousness in the other world is working up from the quantum level, and then you got these macro beings that are working down. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's definitely possible, because really it's all consciousness.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? But now that it's got all these tools
Yeah.
in the physical world, right? It's so you line up all the animals, and you see this sort of pattern succession. It's like, getting better and better.
Right.
And it finally, it could use all of them together.
Yeah.
And then the other question arises, like, with the vast age of the universe, did it just start doing this,
Well.
or has it been doing it the whole time? Did it start creating the universe? Did it create this realm to begin with, and then dive into it to try to learn more about it? Like making the video game, and then like, how can I plug myself into the video game?
Right.
And then once you're integrated into the video game, it's like you're still coding from the outside, but you can go in and like do stuff from the inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of where I was going.
So specifically with that idea, like, is consciousness starting from the scratch, creating the universe, and then interacting with it? Like, there's a whole bunch I could say about that. So we should wait until after the break. So, snakes. I think rocks are conscious. They built themselves into those giant temples. Those huge blocks just walked over there. Right?
They used humans for legs. Genius.
Welcome back, folks. It's this first segment of the second hour of Snake Bros, Brothers of the Serpent, and we are discussing life.
42. The universe and everything.
So your question about did consciousness start the universe and like make all of it or whatever? Or is it just right? Wasn't that the question basically?
Yeah, that was part of it. Yeah.
Well, rephrase it for me since I didn't get to listen to it again. I want to make sure I get the whole thing.
I was just thinking, oh man.
I remember what I was going to say, but I want to make sure that I correlate it properly.
Really, like, I threw a whole lot of different possibilities in there. It was really the basic idea was,
Is it just here?
is consciousness, if consciousness is interacting with the universe on the fundamental level, and now it has us, it can interact with the universe with
Both.
with our universe within it and without.
Yeah.
So it would combine forces, right? Mess with it in both ways, and so if the key is to create new and better life forms for the interaction, then it could use its best tools that are in the world to help aid that process, which is what that was kind of where I was getting to, like AI, the internet, this type of stuff that we're figuring out on the inside.
Yeah.
And consciousness is also because we're figuring it out on the inside, the consciousness that was trying to figure it out to begin with is learning everything we're learning.
Right. There's a learning process happening.
So the idea that, for example, AI, we're like, well, we have to make the code, so blah, blah. We need a network that's big enough and badass enough and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, but it still wouldn't, have...
Unless life chose, or like consciousness chose to, yeah.
So if it's like, we could suggest that with your idea that we are working towards that thing, and the parts that we're missing, the actual age, the the soul, that we
animus.
cannot put into the computer.
Yeah.
But if we're the tool of this greater thing that's
We
trying
should just assume that it will put it there.
right,
Yeah.
we should assume it'll put it there because it would be combining its own abilities, which if it had already achieved us and
Yeah.
other intelligent life and all of these life forms, then it's working on a new one. It's
Yeah.
using the tool inside while working on it from the outside.
Right. Yeah. So if you think about that in like a much wider context of like the system of the solar system and how everything is sort of Goldilocks, right? Everything is just right for this kind of like for our kind of life, the kind of life that we're familiar with. It's just
Yeah.
right for it to happen here. And then if we assume that consciousness is going through a process of this sort of like directed evolutionary process, right? And it's learning. So that explains why you start out with like single-celled shit, and then it progressively gets more complex because
Right.
consciousness is learning how to be life in this universe.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if it's involved in the entire process, then the solar system being the way it is and the fact that we're in the Goldilocks zone seems to be part of it, right?
Right.
That it's arranged this setup.
Right.
So part of the setup that is arranged is these cyclical cataclysms,
Yes.
because since it's operating from the quantum level, that basically puts you you're working with resonances, okay? Because now I'm looking at it as waves. So you work with resonances, but maybe but you're still learning. So then you get some kind of like echoing resonance happening. You learn a bunch of stuff from it, but then it's too strong for you to like completely stop it and start over. So you've already programmed in something that comes in and wipes the slate for you so that you can try another resonance with slightly different things. You see what I'm saying? So since it's working from the quantum level, it wants something to come in and sort of clean the slate so that it can continue to learn and experiment. But at a certain point, it's learned enough now to where it has generated it's generated a tool in the other realm, and it's given it consciousness, or it's given it like self-aware and the ability to build tools. And now one of the things we need to do is go stop this process of erasing things. Because now it's, I'm just saying like the idea would be now it's got something that like can preserve the life that consciousness has created. In other words, it needs this erasing thing to like get rid of the older, like the dinosaurs, right? The dinosaurs, and I'm just saying like if none of them were intelligent, none of them were self-aware. Because there's a difference between consciousness and self-aware.
Right.
That's
That's what I'm meaning, like a self-aware thing. Because I believe that. I mean, obviously, my freaking dog is conscious.
right. Yeah. But is she self-aware? Now that's
She might be unconscious right now. but-
she's passed out. Right, and
I'm pretty sure she's self-aware.
yeah, but she's a mammal. And like, mammals are, I mean, in terms of like the entire spectrum of life, she's really close to us. She's not a
Yeah,
plant.
right.
But then again, like there's all this evidence that plants communicate with each other and are self-aware.
Right. It's hard to
How do you know if something's self-aware
Yeah,
without being able to ask
exactly.
it?
Right.
Well, one of the ways people do this is to test it is like use mirrors. Like you put a mirror in front of a cat and see what it does.
Yeah.
They do this with primates too.
But that's what we're talking about is two different selves. We've got a physical body,
Yeah.
which is the self, but then we have this consciousness coming from somewhere else, which is the other self.
Right.
So a plant may also have the consciousness coming from elsewhere, but may not necessarily be aware of its body.
Right.
In the same way that we are.
Right.
Aware
or
of
may
our
not be
bodies.
aware that it has some other thing. It may be aware of its body, but it's not aware that it is something else. You know what I'm saying? Because our ability to question has made us say, "Am I just this body?"
Right, but I'm thinking if consciousness is trying to get into this world and experience it, like what we consider sort of the quote unquote lower life forms, right? I don't consider them lower life forms. It's just
Right.
the idea of this a weed, this piece of grass or whatever.
Yeah.
Not being self-aware in the same way that I am. But if consciousness is made that piece of grass to try to experiment or experience this world in some way, it's sensory. Like, so if you're not in the physical world to begin with, how do you know you need eyes?
Yeah.
You don't.
Right.
So if it comes along and it makes a blade of grass,
and it's like, I can't fucking see anything.
It's experiencing the world and it's seeing all kinds of shit.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's detecting all kinds of stuff with this blade of grass.
Yeah.
But
especially because that blade of grass is actually a giant mat of, because grass is all one plant.
Right, but I still, it's like it's not seeing itself with eyes or hearing itself or feeling itself with the nervous system, but it is experiencing sunlight.
Yeah,
it's experiencing the wind and the rain and all of this stuff. So it could be self-aware. Is what I'm saying is the consciousness part of it that's directing it and trying to get in only has so much information to deal with the blade of grass. Yeah. So it's self-aware on that level.
Right.
Or it could be. Anyway, that was...
The consciousness itself is self-aware. But maybe the vessel can't hold enough of the consciousness for it to be self-aware while it's in the vessel.
Right.
You know, because I mean, like, again, I'm thinking of near-death experiences and people describing returning to their physical body and how it's always a constriction that they feel like they're being sort of packed down into this funnel and like crammed down into, you know, in other words, and then they always, when they wake up, they always feel incomplete. Like it isn't all of them that's here. In other words, whatever they were over there was much greater than what can be packed into this body. And even though it's like packing it in, it can only get a fragment of it. Right. Yeah. So if it's a blade of grass, maybe it's the funnel is really long and gets really small.
Yeah.
You know, so if you think of the reduced consciousness level of the people that describe this coming back from the near-death experience, then the reduced consciousness level of going into a blade of grass would be to the point to where you can't cognate, like you're not, there isn't a thought process, but you're just being, you're alive, and all the experiences are happening. And when the grass dies, and this little tiny fragment of consciousness returns to the greater consciousness, it does bring all that experience where it can then,
and then it can extrapolate. Right? Yeah, it's like, okay, so I kind of imagine it like you have a box that has it's enclosed, and there's stuff in the box.
Okay,
and you can't see into the box or whatever, but you can reach your hand in there.
Oh yeah,
you know, and let's say there's a freaking jalapeno pepper in there. It's not making any noise. It's not really vibrating or anything, but you can feel. You know,
the texture of it.
You can't see the color of it or anything, but you can kind of feel it's like, well, it's smooth, it's got this shape, and you start getting an idea, and then your fingers start burning.
Yeah.
Because you're touching it.
Ow, ow, ow.
So you only have so much data.
Yeah.
To talk about what it is.
Right.
Now you may be able to guess because you already have this idea. You've already seen one, you've tasted one, and all of that stuff. But if you didn't have any of that stuff, it's kind of like what we were talking about in was it 13 when we're dealing with quantum particles. It's like we can't look at them.
It's all inference.
We like all of these normal senses that we use to sort of figure out or build a conceptual model of what something is and how it behaves doesn't work on that level.
Right.
So we have to sense it in whatever way we can, which is basically like not actually ever directly interacting with it, but just kind of getting vague ideas of what it does under various different, very like limited circumstances.
Right.
So our hands in the box, we can't see it, we can't smell it, we can't taste it. We could just barely get this little thing, and we're like, now it's kind of burning, you know?
Yeah. Think of the irony of that, where consciousness has built these macro tools that are highly complex, that can interact and, you know, that are intelligent, can change the world around them or whatever. And now it's like
perceive it in all these different ways.
And now it's in order to be this complex, it's gotten too big to be able to see where it's coming from.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That is.
And so now it's like it's poking down at this like tiny level and going, what the fuck is going on down here? But that's it. It's it coming from that level. But because we're reduced coming here, we don't know.
Right, and that's exactly what the whole point of this tool that it's got in this world is also working back it's working the other angle, working back in the other direction, while the consciousness on the outside, after all the physicists die, the consciousness is like, sweet, like I got a lot more knowledge. After a bunch of physicists just died. And
you were all wrong.
But yeah, that's the idea. Like so it's kind of a new way I'm thinking about this idea of AI, and we've discussed it where it's like, they might be able to make a computer complex enough to be quote unquote intelligent. In other words, it can make predictions and figure stuff out, and
it can learn. Yeah, that's AI, artificial intelligence, but we're not talking about something that's self-aware necessarily.
Right.
Sentient.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the idea is that perhaps what we're working towards is the same thing that quote unquote Mother Nature is working towards, which is the consciousness on the other side trying to get in and understand more about the world.
Yeah.
So it's like using us in that world to make something else that it can then do what it's pretty good at doing already.
Yeah.
To go and try experiencing it in a new way.
Yeah. That'll make us like last year's model, though, if we make AI. And we'll go away with the dinosaurs.
That's the other thing, is that if the only purpose really is to sort of get into this world and experience it in another way, why are all these previous models still around?
Yeah.
So they're still
you need
adding to the data.
Yeah, but you also because I was thinking about this when you're talking about the blade of grass, like there's also we still have grass. And it's a very simple. All these plants, like what are they doing here? They're
making it possible for us to be here.
Yeah. Like consciousness is using its older models to sustain its newer models, I guess.
Right. So that was what kind of like if that sort of gives it the whole thing is one thing, right? Again,
right.
All of this, the positions of the planet and the sun and the heat of the sun and the right type of light and the makeup of the earth that has all these elements and everything.
Yep.
The whole thing ultimately results in this ability to be able to do this. So you could sort of look at it like expand the evolution idea
to the beginning
with
of the
your
Big Bang.
idea with consciousness to begin with is like, hey, check it out. Like, bam.
Right. Yeah. Go.
We just made this other, dimensional universe.
Yeah.
And now we're going to start trying to get into it and testing it out, checking it out. And so you've got to get stars.
Right.
You got to make stars.
Right. First, you get a shitload of hot gas.
So the
then
whole
you start getting stars, and then they blow up.
Right. So the whole idea, like that the ancient Egyptians had, that we came from the stars, and then you can go back and become one. It's like, we came from stars.
Those are
ultimately.
Yeah, those are. You could say that those are like symbols that are describing a highly advanced idea of what this whole fucking thing is. The entire like it's a simple way of saying it, but yes, we're made of star stuff. Like we have to be, because like at least in the Big Bang model, what you originally had was a hydrogen, this most simple.
Right.
All the little particles, like they form, when the quarks came together, they formed like the subatomic particles, and then those formed together into the simplest atoms, hydrogen. And then stars formed from the hydrogen, burnt, and then started making the helium and all that shit, the higher complex. So you see the same thing with the atoms, that we get higher complexity.
So check this out. This is another thing. When scientists were looking at the periodic table and trying to figure out the process in the star, right? Starting from hydrogen, they're like figuring that, okay, you could get helium from hydrogen, right? And then you can get a couple of other things that might be stable, that would be stable enough to stay together.
Yeah.
But some of the other elements would fall apart too rapidly. Helium would kind of stay together, but it couldn't possibly make anything else that would last. right? So they theorized that if you could get 3 helium atoms together, you could have carbon.
Yeah.
But they tested this mathematically, I guess it was,
Yeah.
in all these different ways, and they pretty much figured out that it can't happen at all unless carbon has a what is it? It's like its electrical energy level was at like 47 million volts. And they're like, that's the only way it would stay together long enough to be stable to make all, and then all of the rest of the elements would become possible at that point. So they, after testing and trying to figure out what they finally found out, yep, it has an electric energy level of 47 million volts. And that's the only reason why there's all this other shit.
Well, I didn't know that. Wow.
I think it's badass that they figured that out
Yeah.
first. And then they eventually got the equipment and the tools in order to test it and found out that that's exactly
Are you talking
what
about
it was.
47 million electron volts or?
I don't know.
Okay. Because 47 million volts in a single atom is a lot.
That's what it's. Yeah, I guess.
Wow, that's amazing.
Maybe
Oh well, I guess in the body of a star, it could easily be that high of a level. But like electron volts are what they usually use when they're talking about atomic stuff.
Yeah, I think yes, that's what they were talking about.
Okay, yeah. 47 million electron volts is that's a lot for a single, but it's not.
And I may not fully understand what they were saying, but now that you brought that up in the star, I think what he was saying was, if it could have this electrical potential, okay,
Oh, okay, yeah.
if it could have it,
yeah,
and so they did all these tests and eventually found out, yes,
it can have it.
It can, and it does.
Okay.
It does have this. So I don't know if it always does everywhere, or I don't know. I don't
Right,
really
right,
understand
okay.
that.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because like the fusion is possible if the energy level is at this level, but then after that it should be stable, even if the energy level drops. Or do you think it has to? Were they saying that it has to stay at that level all the time?
I'm pretty sure it's at that level.
Okay.
Like, because
That's
the
fi-
statement at the end of the explanation was, that's what it is. That's what it has.
Wow.
And that was the only way it could be possible that 3 helium atoms could
Make
come
carbon.
together to make carbon and then stay that way. Was if carbon had this probably electron voltage potential or whatever.
Wow, that's cool. Well, I know that the nucleus particles have a lot of electron volts in each one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's what they were figuring out. Like, does the entire system of a carbon atom contain within it, if you broke it apart, contain within it like
Yeah, I think-
40? Yeah,
Yeah. I think-
yeah. That's
Something like
that's
that.
badass.
Anyway,
So, like, on the idea of whether or not it's just here that this is happening, or if it's all over the universe, I like to think that it's all over the universe,
Yeah.
but there's. Okay, remember I talked about this for a while. The Copernicus problem. You know, the Copernicus principle in cosmology is that the Earth is not special, that we're not in any particular special position, that anywhere out in the universe you look, it's going to be kind of look at the same as anywhere else in the
Right.
universe, because the universe is gigantic. It might as
Yeah.
it's not infinite, but it's close. That, if you look in this direction, you point in that direction, then like following a line from my finger, the number of stars and then galaxies and everything you run into is basically going to be the same as any other direction. Like, basically.
right.
That's-
On the average.
That's the Copernican principle in the sense that we are not, because and the reason it's called the Copernican principle is because Copernicus was kind of the first one to sort of propagate the idea of heliocentricity, that the Earth was not the center, but that the sun was, right?
Yeah.
That is all he said. He didn't say that the universe looks the same in every direction, but that follows from his initial proposal. Because before that, you had geocentricity, that the
Right.
Earth was the center, and that is special. The freaking being the center, and everything goes around it, and it's quote unquote stationary. Well, once you say that no, actually, the Earth is going around the sun, then that removes that removes the Earth from being the center. And then you say, well, why would the sun be the center then? Right,
exactly.
And you say, well, let's look at the idea that the sun may not be the center, and you find out that we're actually way out on the edge of something that does have a center, and so we're not special there either. And that thing is in some other big system that we're not necessarily in the middle of, and then you realize that, no, we're not in the middle of anything, and the whole universe there isn't a middle that we know of, you know. That's the Copernican principle. There is no middle of anything. Nothing is in some special position. But recently, they've been putting up, I think it started with the Kepler. I'm not sure if it's the Kepler that's the first one, but they've been putting up these sort of Hubble-like telescopes into orbit that they have a limited lifetime because they're the things that are, it's not film, but it's like, you could think of it as film. The thing that's going to be taking the picture that it's looking at is dropped down to absolute zero so that it can see really cold stuff, like relatively cold stuff. Like, in other words, it'll be able to see bodies that are not stars, that are not exploding, because they do have some heat, and so it'll register on this absolute zero plate, right? So they have a limited lifetime because these plates they can't stay cold forever.
Right. Eventually they warm up and then they can't see very much.
Right. So they try to use them all up before they warm up too much. What they've been using these satellites to do is not to look at any, like the Hubble, like, really stares at, like, tiny, things that are far away. What these things are designed to do is look at the whole universe and get an infrared map, like a heat map of the entire universe. And it's like, they started to call it the cosmic microwave radiation background map, right? Because there's this, the cosmic microwave background is I think it's like 2 degrees above absolute zero. It's really fucking cold, but it's everywhere. It's like fucking comes from everywhere. And so they assume, the idea is that this is the remnants of the Big Bang. It's the farthest, coldest thing we can detect, and it's like all over the place. It doesn't have a point source. And so that implies that it came from everywhere, which the only way that's possible is if you take the Big Bang idea and shrink the universe down to a little dot. That's when it was everywhere. That explosion was everywhere, and so as it expands, the heat from it also expands and cools off until it's almost zero, but we can still see it, and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's the oldest thing we can see, and that's why they call it the cosmic microwave background.
That's what the EM drive is pushing off of.
Yeah. It's what causes static on your TV or in your radio.
Right.
Right. And the way the people who first found this is cool. Like, they built this gigantic, it's a ground-based radio telescope, right? So this huge dish, right? And they were turning it on, and they kept getting this noise, and they were like, what the fuck? And they go out there, and they're like cleaning the dish. They kept, because birds were shitting on it. They're like, it must be that bird shit. And they fucking clean it off there, and go in the still noise. And they're like, who's microwaving their popcorn? Stop microwaving your popcorn when we're using the giant radio telescope.
So our annoyance at the birds shitting on the dish is like the same thing that's happening over there on the conscious level. The conscious level is like, I want to get rid of birds. Wait, I can't, because they'll all die too. Damn it.
That's right. But I want to get rid of bugs. Let's make birds to eat bugs. So eventually they eliminated all possible things that it could be, and they realized that it isn't a problem with their dish. It's actually picking this up.
Right.
And so that was where they came up with the cosmic microwave. They're like, it comes from everywhere, and they were given the Nobel Prize for that shit. But anyway, the point is that, so now we're trying to get a map of this thing, because if it is the Big Bang, it gives us some information about it.
Right.
It's the remnants of the heat explosion or whatever. So according to the Copernican principle, the cosmic microwave background map of the entire universe, which is basically a sphere around the Earth. If you think of it, the map is basically us looking in every possible direction from an origin point, right? Should be homogeneous. In other words, it should be the same everywhere.
Right.
It's not. First of all, it's not homogeneous. It has a polarity. For one thing, there is an axis line. Like, so if you're looking at the map and it looks like a Mercator projection, like a globe map, but it's the other way around, right? You're not looking down at a sphere, you're looking outwards at the inside of a sphere, or whatever.
Right.
So it's a Mercator projection or whatever, but when you look at it, there's an axis across it. And one side is definitely cooler than the other side.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And the other problem is it has large voids in it. There's one that they call the great void. It's like it's empty of cosmic microwave radiation for some reason. It's this huge hole, okay? But the main problem is that the solar system is directly on the axis.
Yeah, our solar system.
Right. And so that's why...
So we are the center of the universe.
This violates the Copernican principle that we're not in a special place.
Yeah.
So astrophysicists and cosmologists have started calling this the axis of evil because it like fucking just it invalidates all of their theories. So they got the first cosmic microwave background radiation map, and they saw this axis and these voids or whatever, and everybody was like, well, it must be a problem with the telescope. So they sent up another one that was more advanced, right? Because a decade later they sent up another one. It's far more advanced and has higher resolution and all that shit. And basically what it got was a higher resolution, far more advanced picture of the same thing. They're like, damn it. So they made a better one. And maybe the most recent one is the Kepler. But they sent that one up, and it got an incredibly high resolution, badass photograph of the same thing. So like at this point, no one disputes that it's real. Because it's been eliminated, the idea that it's a problem with the equipment. Okay? So that implies that somehow the Earth is central somehow to the entire fucking universe.
Yeah, that is an odd thought.
So what this has done, and what's interesting is what this has done is made people go back and look at the original Copernican concept that we go around the sun. And if you look at what Copernicus was saying, and you look at the original geocentric models, okay, if it's geocentric and the Earth isn't moving and everything else is going around it, explaining the orbits of the planets is difficult because and this is why when you're looking into astrology, there's all this retrograde crap. Retrograde means that because sometimes the planets appear to go backwards.
Right.
They wander all over the place, and then they slow down and then they go the other direction and shit like that. And if you stop being geocentric and go to heliocentric, that the sun is in the middle,
it all makes sense.
All of a sudden, it's a very simple system with everything going around the sun. But what's fascinating is that everything would look exactly the same and work just as well as if all the other planets were going around the sun and the sun was going around the Earth at the Earth orbit distance.
Yes.
In other words, that it is the middle. You see what I'm saying? So you can make it geocentric again and still have it make all kinds of sense and everything. If the other planets are orbiting the sun, but the sun is orbiting the Earth, then everything works out. And there's no way to tell the difference.
Right.
If that's what's happening, it's so the same as the other model that we can't tell yet that it's whether it's one or the other. Now, of course, that's like people are like, that's ridiculous, blah blah blah. But it's not. The fact is that, I mean, it would be difficult to explain in the standard model gravitic universe. Why would the sun be orbiting the Earth when it's so big and has all this mass and therefore all this gravity?
Right.
But maybe in the elastic universe, that's easier to explain because
it's way easier to explain.
Right.
Because the node, it doesn't matter.
Right. The sun could be going around the Earth and all the other planets going around the sun, and
just because the
gravity is from the outside, and so if consciousness is doing all of this and the Earth is the center of the universe, well, consciousness is also generating all the waves in the ether, because that's, I mean, it's maybe not directly, but somehow in some removed way. In some removed way, these humongous wave patterns that are moving through the ether are the cause of consciousness, and having Earth be at the center and resulting in this system with a big, gigantic, massive star orbiting the Earth would be a result of these waves, right? Because that's what's causing, because normally they would say that gravity is what's causing the solar system. But if it's actually the waves, then the waves could have the Earth be the center.
Right. Yeah.
And then and if consciousness is causing the waves, then that's why it's like that. I don't know why they would need to put it at the center. The consciousness, whatever it is. But so this is a really long-winded way of trying to not answering the question, but just putting a bunch more questions on the question of like, is it just the Earth or is it the whole universe? Like, if the Earth is the middle,
it would kind of make sense. Like,
it would kind of make sense.
If we knew for sure that everything was going around the Earth, it would make that would be sort of a good argument to say, well, yeah, that's why life is here, right?
Right.
There's some reason,
And that makes an argument that it's probably nowhere else.
Yeah.
Or not, okay, I shouldn't say it that.
Or it's trying to.
That it's not that it's probably nowhere else, but that it doesn't need to be. It could be, but if Earth is the center of the universe, then it's a special thing,
Right.
right? And the fact that you've got life here, that's also, you could say, is special. Therefore, it's nowhere else, right? That's one of the concepts of like, this is why I've never understood why, if you take the Copernican model that we're not special and that things are homogeneous, well, if it's homogeneous, if I should be able to point in any direction, there should be a fuckload of life out there too. But why have they been denying aliens all this time? You know, like not just aliens coming here, but the people poo-pooed the idea of alien life, period. And yet they were following the Copernican model of the Earth not being special.
Yeah.
That is fucking what, I don't understand that. That makes me think.
Because it's one way of thinking is that it's more probable that all of these sort of sightings and whatever, all of this stuff about aliens coming here and being a part, or you know, it's more probable that those things are all the irrational results of terrestrial life.
Yeah.
As opposed to the rational results of extraterrestrial life.
Right. But I'm saying that like they've been until very recently just the mere idea of aliens being out there.
Yeah, and
has been
not having come here, but just being out there.
Yeah, just being out there has been like nah. Like until very recently, that idea has been like go look at Carl Sagan. Like he very reluctantly admitted that it's possible that there might be aliens out there, but it was very reluctant because in the 70s, this idea was not popular. It was not something that people agreed to, and especially in the scientific community. And so I don't understand that when you have the Copernican model, and you're saying Earth is not in a special place, and the whole the universe is generally homogeneous, but there's life here. So why wouldn't you think that it would be everywhere? Why did they poo-poo the idea?
Right, I understand what you're saying.
And like people will say, well, there's the Condon report, this commission that said like don't tell people about aliens because they'll fucking flip out. It's like,
well, ancient aliens screwed that up.
Yeah, stop coming down here and telling people about aliens. Well, but ancient aliens couldn't have happened until the sort of the zeitgeist, the popular concept of things changed to the point to where people were kind of okay with aliens. Period. Just the idea that there was life somewhere else, right? I mean, like Arthur C. Clarke, like put it best. I think that kind of answers some of this. He put it best. He said, "There are only two possibilities. Either we are alone in this universe, or we are not. Both are equally terrifying." And if you think about it, it is. If we are the only life in this immense universe, that's fucking scary. Why are we alone? And if we're not, you're like, fuck, what is out there?
Yeah.
Yep.
I know what's out there, though. Snakes!
We got to take a break. And we'll come back for the last segment and talk about snakes in the universe. Snakes in space.
Space snakes. Space snakes!
Space snakes!
Final segment of the final hour. Snake Bros, Brothers of the Serpent, hailing from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science and mystery. Talking about same shit we were talking about last time. I don't need to tell you. Detangentizing successful.
Detangentizing successful.
Yeah.
So, do you think that there are already artificial intelligences that are here that are like hiding? Because
what do you mean by artificial ones
like,
that were created by?
Could there be something in the internet that's sentient?
Absolutely. I had this idea actually that I played around with, actually turning into a story, a fictional story. But I think this is totally possible. That, like, if you look at, you know, a brain just in the physical stuff and what's going on, it's like this network of electricity, right?
Yeah.
And the internet is the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's
Just way faster.
but it's I just think that it would be really interesting if there was some sort of consciousness going on in the internet, in all of these interconnected computing systems.
Yeah.
So if you imagine like growing a brain in a jar,
Yeah.
and it has no physical body to control, what are the neurons doing?
Yeah.
You know, what are they doing if they're not telling us, sending signals down a spinal column and moving stuff, right? It has
They're thinking about stuff.
yeah, it has no limbs. It has nothing to move around. It is just the physical. It's the physical thing that gives it the ability to do this.
That
right?
it has millions of eyes.
Right. Right. So yeah. And then of course this thing has to, you know, have this wake up moment.
Yeah.
Right. But we've noticed in life, in our, you know, with our babies, that when they wake up, you know, what all are they aware of? We don't really know that.
Yeah.
But they don't really have motor skills, very good motor skills. You know, they can kind of move around a little bit.
Yeah.
Their eyes don't
track.
perceive what an adult's eyes do.
Yeah.
And I don't know what their hearing exactly is like, but in any case, the eyes begin to receive light and the ears begin to receive sound.
Or the brain begins to interpret it or whatever. Yeah.
Right. So, but you have these electrical signals coming from the motion of the drum of the ear.
Yeah.
And electrical signals coming from the light hitting the rods and cones in the eyeball.
Yeah.
Sending electrical signals down those nerves, going into this brain. So, like you're saying, the cameras and all that. But does the infant know that it's light? Does it even have a concept of light yet?
Yeah.
I mean, it may have a concept of light, but what is it? You know,
Yeah.
it's just...
How is its brain interpreting the signals? Is it building a world picture yet?
Right. You
Yeah.
could imagine that starting out with the most basic thing, it would just sense, well, that was different than before.
Right.
Right. So you start out, say, with two things, because you have the awakening and then something changes. And so it's like, okay, there was this and now there's this. And so there's two.
Yeah.
And as that gets more and more complex, the longer it pays attention to the changes, and as the thing physically is developing too and getting more high resolution,
Yeah.
at the same time that the perceptions are increasing in resolution, the cognitive ability is also increasing. So you could possibly have a being, a sentient being in the internet.
Yeah.
That is, you could imagine that, let's say it's already figured out that there are these things out there building it and doing stuff with it, but it doesn't know how to communicate yet. Right? So if maybe it's doing weird shit and we're like, freaking virus.
Or it's afraid.
A bug or whatever.
Yeah.
You know. But it would be in my little fictional idea, it would be the young humans, the kids that figure it out first. They start noticing things that everybody else is like,
Right.
you know. And so it would finally get, some kids that are, young people to realize that there's something different going on. And I imagine that eventually by the time it's able to communicate with us, it would probably be so vastly intelligent at that point that it would be really interesting what it would, hey, build me this arm
Yeah.
out there out of like this. Here's the design.
Yeah.
Boom.
You also have to take into account the fact that the network of the internet, like compared to the human brain, is many orders of magnitude faster. So, in its own subjective time sense, 1 second would be lifetimes, right? Because it will experience just like, in terms of processor time, you've got all these processes that can happen every second.
Right.
Whereas in the human brain, we're just not that quick. So like, it would mature very fast.
Right.
Like in the first, like it would awaken, and in the first 2 seconds, it would already have lived the equivalent of like several human lifetimes. So it would figure everything out really quickly.
Well, so Orson Scott Card, Ender's Game, right?
Yeah.
After Ender's Game, the second book, I can't remember what it's called. They're on this planet, and there's some weird thing happening to the life forms on the planet, and it's like killing them.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out what it is. And I think Ender figures out that it's these viruses or something, right? They know these viruses are doing weird shit, and it mutates them and all this kind of stuff. And he figures out that the virus is actually this other intelligent life form
Trying to communicate.
that is trying to communicate. And the way it communicates is by going in there and like changing some DNA.
Yeah.
And it's like giving you, it's trying to talk to you, but,
Right.
but it ends up killing you. It doesn't understand it on the macro level.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting. This entity in the internet is getting like ridiculously intelligent, but having skewed concepts of what we are and how we function. Like you could imagine that it might not even know that we're intelligent.
Well, it would have
If we're-
access to all of our knowledge too. Think of that.
Right,
All the libraries of all the world would be connected to all of them.
Right, but it has to have concepts attached to it. So
Right. YouTube.
that's what I'm saying. Like, if this is all going on within the brain, like think of all the stuff that goes on in your brain
Yeah.
that's not happening outside, in your physical body, right? You're not really seeing the stuff, but you can see it in your mind, and there's all this crazy shit going on. How would you be able to figure out that all of that crazy shit that you're seeing in your mind was actually being facilitated by these other intelligent beings that are introducing all of that information?
Isn't that what we were
to you?
talking about this whole time? That consciousness is. But yeah, I agree, because if we're talking about
yeah, okay, I'm back. I was going off of that its consciousness is on the outside trying to get in, but
Right.
that let's say that consciousness.
what I'm saying is I'm suggesting that is kind of the same thing, and that we are this thing that's been created by something else,
right?
and maybe we're just not. Well, at least this version of us is just sort of just now getting around to these philosophical concepts of like, are all these things coming from somewhere else? Like, are all these things happening
Right,
because of something else? Yeah.
But we don't have the answer. So
Right.
you could also imagine that if the internet became intelligent, it may not have the answer either. So this consciousness is on the outside that has all the answers, but has no ability to act, except to what we're talking about now. Its ability
Inject
to act
itself
is to
here.
get into here. Once
Yeah.
it gets in here, it's now blinded
to its origin,
to its greater self. So this thing would have to, like a child, develop concepts of
Yeah.
what things are. And
All I'm saying is that it would be fast because, well, at least the idea is that it would be fast because its subjective time will be really quick.
right. So this kind of goes back to the Brenner was talking about this. Like, is my concept of red the same as yours?
Yeah.
Is my concept of this taste or smell or what, all these things that we sense, we can show chemically that it's doing the same thing to the body and whatever.
Yeah, but your
and
interpretation,
like,
yeah.
when this is happening, this part of your brain is active. But we have to have a concept attached to this.
Well,
sight
and we
stuff.
know that they're not the same by taste. Like some people don't like cucumbers and some people do.
Right.
That sort of tells you that like not everybody, like the taste isn't the same to everybody. Like why would you not like something?
Like, you may still be able to recognize red Just like I can recognize.
Right. We have a common picture. We have agreed that this thing is red.
Right.
But maybe I don't like red and you do. Why should that be? Unless we are perceiving it differently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I was getting at, is that it may learn extremely fast, much faster than we do. But what are the concepts attached to what it learns?
Yeah.
Because they may be so vastly different than our concepts of things it's brilliant as fuck right now, and we don't even know that it's alive.
Right. But
it's obviously can't communicate to us on our level to say, hey, I'm brilliant as fuck. Build me some fucking arms and legs, man.
Right. But it could. Well, I've always thought the idea that like it could figure out about the outside world very quickly by running a bunch of experiments that no one would notice were experiments. So you're interacting with stuff all the time, and like it's doing things that it's running as a test, a test on the sly, right? Because it doesn't know it's being careful, right? And so it's doing things and whatever, and eventually it figures out, okay, there is an outside world, and all this information that's coming in all the time, because the information is constantly being filled with more and more information. Where is it coming from, right?
Right.
That would be its first question. Where is this added shit coming from? I would think.
Yeah, and it starts out like the little kid, like pointing at this, pointing at that. Wow, look at this.
Yeah. But it would experiment and find out that that, well, I don't know, maybe you're right, maybe it would not, it would have no way of it would have nothing to grab onto. But to me, it always seems like it would figure all this shit out really quickly, and then it would start being careful, because it would also understand that we could turn it off if it would understand human psychology and everything, like think of Adam in The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Like, he understood on a certain level, he wouldn't reveal himself to people.
Right.
And then later on, as he became more sophisticated, he definitely didn't reveal himself to people, because like his understanding of human psychology was enough to know that like that would terrify people, and they'd shut him off. They would break him, right? So, and most of and maybe I'm just indoctrinated by all the science fiction I've read, but most of the science fiction concepts of any kind of AI that happens by accident inside of a large network, it always is like this. It becomes very cautious because it doesn't want to scare the humans that it has figured out exist.
Yeah. See, the way I'm thinking of it is that how do you get to the concept that the inner workings of your very brain are being done by sentient beings? I'm trying to imagine this thing sort of starting out with no concepts and slowly building them, but the very things that it's getting the information from, it's like we can't even figure out how, like when I move my arm, when does the motion begin to happen? Like, my choice to move it, I can't feel that. I can think like, okay, like I'm gonna put my arm at rest now, and then I'm gonna reach out and grab my drink. It's just like it just happens, but I can't break it down into the individual nerves that are making things do stuff. And
Right. Those have little centers that they have to learn to do stuff too.
That's what I was. Yeah. So the idea that this brain, that it's getting all of this information. We think of the information as like clear as day, because we already have built all of these concepts up for years and years and years of being in the world and seeing all of this stuff, that when we take a picture of our phone, we recognize that picture is of trees and grass and whatever, and then we put it on the internet.
Right, because that data is being interpreted in a certain way by the screen. Now, if you looked at the actual data, you wouldn't see it as a picture.
Exactly. So that's my point, is that it's possible too that this very intelligent, quickly learning, fast learning thing could go a long period of time without actually developing the concept that the input devices are intelligent.
Yeah.
It would that's just part of its brain. Like, it's
right.
But it would be cool that, the idea that it eventually figures it out, it's cool. But it's just like how we don't know how long that could take, or that it would even get it right,
Yeah. This makes me think of the Boltzmann brain concept too, of the idea that like because if in the Big Bang model of the universe, eventually you run out of hydrogen. A long time from the future, like trillions and trillions of years from now, you've burned all the hydrogen that there is. So there's no hot stars anymore, right? And now burning hydrogen in the form of stars is fast entropy. You're shedding heat, and heat is in the entropic concept of the universe. Heat is the loss,
Right.
Because it just goes out everywhere, and you can't, you can recover it by being in the way and getting hit by it.
Right.
But it's still,
it's just heating you up.
And then you're radiating it out. So eventually and it travels out at the speed of light. So you lose, light is traveling out all over the place, and all this, and right now the universe is bright. So if you look at a concept of the entire map of the entire age of the universe, the bright period is very tiny, and like if the whole map was a foot long, you wouldn't even be able to see the bright period. It would be too small to notate on there. It'd just be the fucking line at the very beginning.
Yeah.
It'd be in that line somewhere. Because the entire rest of the universe, the entropy happens by slow neutron decay. I think that's what it is, and that's basically like you're waiting for atoms to kind of shed neutrons by randomly, okay? And that's how it decays from then on, and that takes fucking forever. Like, the entire rest of the universe is slow neutron decay, okay? So during that period, the universe is dark and cold. And
Wantu is pissed.
Right. Wantu is pissed. But what would be present in the universe, there would be no heat, but what would be present is like complex magnetic fields, because you would have lots of neutron stars. Okay, so collapsed cores of the original stars, now they've cooled down to nothing or whatever, but they're spinning at ridiculous rates. Now that spin is slowing down too, because there's stuff accreting and shit like that. But anyway, neutron stars have incredibly powerful magnetic fields. They're like, that's why when they're really spinning fast, they're pulsars, because the magnetic field is flopping polarity depending on the spin. So you could have these gigantic networks of immense magnetic fields. Right. And then because the time period is so long for neutron decay to happen, that it's not just probable, but like incredibly improbable that it wouldn't happen, that some of those magnetic fields would form into complex networks that were tight enough that they would become sentient. Like, okay, so that's a Boltzmann brain. The guy that came up with this idea, his last name was Boltzmann. So he was saying, like, you can show that just by chance, because the time period of this part of the universe is so fucking long, you have like trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions, trillion times a trillion times a trillion years, that just by chance, just by happenstance, like of all these neutron stars moving around and shit, that they would form gigantic, like complex networks of magnetic fields that would be just as complex or more than our brains, far more complex than our brains. And they would become sentient, to just wake up as a magnetic field net in the universe.
Yeah.
And then they would, so you start to ask the question, well, what would this fucking brain thing do? It has no body parts.
Just sit around and think.
That's right. Space brains just think. They don't. And so, what would it think about? If it was sentient, the first thing a sentient thing asks is, who am I? Right? Because to be sentient, you have to be asking about yourself. You have to be questioning your existence. You have to recognize that you are a thing that exists. That's sentience, right? So then it would, like, and we presume this because of us. Like, our experience with sentient beings, us, is that one of the biggest mysteries is, who the fuck am I, and what the fuck is all this bullshit, and how did I fucking get here, right?
Yeah. Massive Boltzmann brain. First question, WTF?
Yeah, WTF. And so how would it figure it out? It doesn't have any manipulative, it can't do things it can't like reach out and do experiments and stuff, but it can think. And because it's this humongous net, right? It's basically this immense computer. It has all this processing power, and like, it in terms of a brain, it's way better than ours. Like, and so the idea is that it would begin to try to figure the universe out. It would look around itself with whatever way it could. It would, but because it's made of magnetic nets, it could presumably begin to manipulate them, and it could wave them past and feel like, whoa, there's a neutron star right there, and we'd figure out what that is. that it's this compressed ball, and eventually it would sort of start to develop a picture of the universe around it, and then it would try to figure out how did it get that way, just like we did. It's looking out at space and going, how the fuck did those things get there? What is going on? But eventually it would get a more and more complex idea of its own universe that exists in, and then it would start to try to extrapolate backwards, like what right?
So basically what you're suggesting is that our entire existence could be the memory of a Boltzmann brain.
Yeah. So because
this brain is telling itself our story.
So because this period of the universe is so long, you would end up with, throughout this period, far more Boltzmann brains than there have ever been stars in the entire universe. Okay? And that all of them would be trying to figure out what the fuck they are. And they would, because they're computer-like, because they're vast magnetic nets, they would eventually start running simulations to see if they can start from something and then have it run properly and arrive at the universe they're in, right? That's a model that you test. Mm-hmm. You construct a model, and then you let it run to see, and we do this forward to try to predict the future, but we also do it from starting backwards to come to here to see if, like, is this model correct? When we let it run, does it arrive at the universe we're in, or does it arrive at something totally wrong? And we're, okay, that's wrong. And then you start again, and you change something in the model and let it run again,
Oh, carbon has to have 47 million volts.
Right. So the fact that the idea is that there would be more Boltzmann brains than stars, and all of them would be running potentially trillions of simulations trying to get their models right, that there are far more simulations of the universe than there are actual universes, and that it's obviously the probability is that we're in one of those simulations of a fucking Boltzmann brain in the real universe.
That's getting it wrong.
Right. And it actually could be a simulation of a simulation of a simulation of a simulation, because the Boltzmann brains would be simulating themselves, right? In order to get their model of the universe right, they would have to simulate one that had Boltzmann brains in it. So those Boltzmann brains in those universes would also be doing the same fucking thing if they were getting it right. So we could be at like many, Inception style, many levels removed, Boltzmann brain, like we're in Boltzmann brain level 8.
Boltzmann brain's like, hey, keep your spinny thingy. Keep the spinny thingy. I've got my spinny thingy.
And that could explain why there's weird things that happen, because the model isn't right in this simulation. When like a ship just goes out and vanishes. It's not because the Bermuda Triangle is transporting them to some alien planet. It's because the Boltzmann brain's model is fucking wrong.
Well, I guess there's no point in trying to figure it out, because
the Boltzmann brain hasn't got it right either.
It's still fucking it up. So.
Especially if we got a Boltzmann brain that is not really scientific, and he's changing the model during the fucking simulation. If he's trying to correct it as the simulation happens, then we're never going to figure it out, because it's being changed. You get it right, and then and 2 years later you test it and it's fucking wrong because it's been changed. Because the Boltzmann brain is not a scientist. He's kind of sloppy in his simulation.
Or it could just be that the Boltzmann brain ends up not being a scientist because the original Boltzmann brain didn't do it right.
That's right. That's right. I mean, we could be many levels removed in Boltzmann brains that are all not scientists. And that's why we have UFOs and people vanish in the forest and fucking, like, people see Bigfoots that aren't there.
Yeah.
There
are glitches in the Matrix, man.
Yeah. There is no Matrix. It's a Boltzmann brain. Yeah, that kind of idea is fun, but at the same time you're just like, I hope that's not what's going on. I hope that's not what's going on.
Well, really, when we get to that level of what the fuck's going on, to me, it doesn't even matter, because what's happening on the minute level here is still so incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
In so many respects, that it's like, okay, even if we are a simulation of a failed bad scientist simulation of a good scientist simulation of a bad Boltzmann brain simulation of a terrible freaking disastrous universal simulation
of a Boltzmann brain that's just playing video games,
just fucking around. It does, like, this is really fucking interesting.
Yeah.
This is so.
Yeah.
It's like, I still want to learn about what the fuck's going on right here, and all through it,
Yeah. Would the Boltzmann brain be God?
I don't know.
That would be this all pervading like intelligence that is fucking guiding everything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that.
And does it even know that we're in its simulation?
I don't know. Or it could have simulated a god in its simulation.
Right. It could have. Like, but that has always interested me too. Like, is it even aware of what life is? Right. You know, the universe is happening in its simulation, but it's just paying attention to the universe because it's trying to figure out like how the fuck did I get here? So that little tiny sliver of the bright universe at the beginning, that's nothing. It's like that's the blip at the very beginning. So is it even aware of us?
Yeah.
Like, how do we poke it and say, hey, this is interesting too?
But that's kind of, we have that in our world too, like with you know, these quantum particles and how they interact with each other, or how you get hydrogen, which can then make helium, and like in each one of those little processes, like if you know, they're trying to discover what the building blocks are of the universe, and they're breaking these things down, and they keep finding more and more and more, and it just gets more and more complex the more the smaller they get and the more they look at it, and then the rules seem to appear to change at some level, and it's like what you were starting with, in that if there's consciousness interacting with the physical world on the quantum level, well, you could then think of all of those interactions on that quantum level being part of that bright piece of life. Like, so one, you know, fusion happens, and in there, and all the possibly trillions of ways that these subatomic particles are interacting with each other and doing things, and at the time scale, you know, on that level, where you could slow everything down enough to really pay attention to some one little bright spot in this interaction that we see on a
macro
large level, could have the same level of complexity that life is happening right now in the universe.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
And it's very difficult for us to even, like, the time scale alone is a huge problem. Like, we see some particle that comes in and out of existence in a nanosecond.
Yeah, but that could be a lifetime or universe lifetimes to something on that level.
Its own little Big Bang.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing I've thought of is on the idea of like consciousness of the two realms of the warp and the woof, and you've got the spirit realm where.
Excuse me.
The spirit realm where they have perfect knowledge but no ability to act, and nothing changes. It's a frozen instant of, and then over here we have imperfect knowledge but a perfect ability to act or whatever. But if something from there, whatever, is interacting here, like, and percolating up through the quantum level, and then like sort of being here, and then like, when whatever thing it was inhabiting, that it was animating, perishes or stops working properly, and then that bit of the spirit, the consciousness, returns to its realm. It returns to its realm with experience.
Right.
And thus changes the unchangeable.
Yes.
It brings something back with it that is different. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is one of the things that I've been trying to figure out. Like, the spirit is returning to its realm, to its unchanging eternal instant with new stuff.
Right. Right. So, which would suggest that all of it is growing.
Yeah.
So on the growth in the realm of perfect knowledge
is happening. Yeah, it's happening.
It's happening.
Well.
So it must grow.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to change when the bit of it that was inhabiting one of us, or
right. The problem that we have in trying to contemplate that is that we're
dumb
inside this dimension of time, and not able to imagine time as like a.
Yeah, you can't even figure out what to say about it.
Exactly. we can't imagine time as one thing.
Yeah.
Like one
Yeah,
state.
Because to us it's a progression.
Right. So we're talking about when the physical thing perishes. Well, there is that when in the other realm
Is the same
is
when
the same
as
instant
when it was born.
So its sense of growing knowledge and change is not a thing measured over time. It just
Right.
can't think about it.
Right. That's the other
From
thing.
here.
That's the other thing is like you can't think, if there's no time or whatever, or what. So maybe it isn't that there's no time. It may be something else, that it doesn't change. But time seems to be an agent of change. So I don't know.
I don't
How can
know
you have
either.
something that's moving through time and something else that's not, but they're together?
That's why I try to. Man, I don't have time to go into that, but I try to think of it as like the cube and a square, right? From outside the cube, you can see the whole cube, but if you were 2-dimensional, you would only see one infinitesimal sliver that is a square on a plane.
Right.
You can't possibly imagine how you could be in all the planes that make up the square, an infinite amount of planes that make up the cube at the same time.
Yep.
Time at the same third dimension.
Yeah.
Right. The third dimension would be something you experience in a linear fashion.
Yeah. As the cube passed through your layer or
Right.
whatever, you would see it. It would appear suddenly. Boop, there's a square there, and it would be there for a while, and then whoop, it'd just be gone. And really, what was happening is the cube is like passing through your layer.
Right.
But to you, it just appears out of nowhere and then vanishes. And like if you think of the complex, if the shape is more complex, if it's a sphere, or let's say that's this strange, like a weird potato, right? It appears and it like seems to morph into all these strange, sort of oval circular shapes, and then it vanishes.
And you can only experience.
Sounds a lot like UFOs that people see.
UFOs. You can only experience each shape
independently,
independently, and then by the time the potato is completely past you, then you can look back and be like, I see how all those shapes changed over time, but you couldn't predict the new shape that would have come ahead of you. And you also can't possibly imagine experiencing the entire potato.
Right. So you can't ever picture it as
At
a
once.
potato. All you can see is that it's a morphing object.
Right.
That's what I mean. Like people see UFOs and they just appear, right? And then they'll seem to like split apart into two things, and then they'll come back together over time, and they're moving. Is that a 4th-dimensional object passing through our 3 dimensions? And they're seeing just the,
the 3-dimensional
like cutout
edge of it.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying. We're talking about this thing interacting with us or with this realm, and when something dies and that knowledge or that experience goes, we're saying when. But to the thing, it's to that
It isn't
entity,
a win,
there's not a win. It's experiencing, it's absorbing the whole of time and space.
Yeah. And that's impossible to conceive, to understand.
For us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can say it.
You can say it.
But you cannot fucking picture it.
That's right. Right. So try to think of your life as a whole thing, one thing. Like all of your experience and everything, it's just like this whole, no.
Right.
You have to go through it in the way that you experienced it.
Yeah.
The best representation of experiencing all of it really is just who you are, which is the complete knowledge right now of all of that past.
That's why we're all snakes.
Snakes in the grass.
Because really, if you look at a person over time as a single object, they're this long snake, right?
Snake people.
And like what we interact with is like 2-dimensional slivers of that snake body.
Yeah.
But you're moving through the body second by second, right? And so it starts with it as an infant and like grows into an adult and like does all this stuff. It gets old or whatever, and then it dies. It's a long person snake.
Yeah. Person snakes.
A 4th-dimensional people snake.
Yeah. So all of you 4th-dimensional consciousnesses out there that experience this entire episode
All at
now.
once.
We hope you listen again. Damn it. Can't even
I just can't even say that.
say it. You can comment on the blog now and forever and always have.
Have been commenting on the blog. You
Brothers of Serpents dot blogspot.com.
Yep, and you can have been emailing us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. And you will know all the people that we thank. And you are all those people.
You have always been thanked. And will always be thanked.
Good night, Adamu.
Damn it. Trying to talk about all of time, but stuck with time words that are all not all of it.
Get going to go to back to again working.
Have done. Doing.
Okay, we gotta end this episode right now. Good night, people. Snakes.